My 7-year-old grandson accidentally took my daughter-in-law's lunchbox to school. His teacher called me, "You need to come down here right away." I rushed to the school without a second thought. A police officer led me into a room. "What your grandson brought is terrible. Look." When I looked inside, I couldn't believe it. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know how far it's reached. I jumped, and a few lettuce leaves fell to the floor as the phone rang, shattering the silence. The old flip phone, the one my son, David, had insisted I use, was buzzing loudly in my apron pocket. I wiped my hands on my clothes, my heart suddenly pounding for no reason. Who would be calling at this hour? It couldn't be Lucy or David. They're both at the office right now, buried in work. I answered, my voice a little shaky as I pressed the button. "Hello, who is this?" On the other end, the voice of Miss Jimenez, Leo's teacher, sounded frantic, like she was trying not to scream. "Mrs. Carroll, you need to come to the school immediately. Something serious has happened with Leo." It felt like a hand was squeezing my chest. Her voice was trembling, almost breaking, and I knew instantly this wasn't something small. "Ma'am, what happened?" "What's wrong with Leo?" I asked, but she just repeated even more urgently, "Just get here fast." She didn't give me time to think. My heart was hammering like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I hastily grabbed my coat from the hook. My trembling hands fumbled with the lock on the door, and I ran out towards the bus stop at the end of the alley. My old worn-out sandals nearly made me slip several times, but I didn't care anymore. The only thing in my head was Leo, that 7-year-old boy with big round eyes, always smiling like a ray of sunshine. If anything happened to him, I didn't know how I'd go on. On the bus, I huddled in a seat at the back, my hands gripping the seat in front of me. My chest was pounding like a drum, beat after beat, making it hard to breathe. I kept muttering to the driver, my voice cracking, "Sir, how much longer until we get to St. Peter's Elementary?" The driver, an old man with white hair, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. He must have seen the desperation on my face, because he just answered curtly, "We'll be there in 10 minutes, don't you worry." But how could I not worry? A series of horrible images flashed through my mind. Did Leo fall? Did someone hit him? Or something worse, an accident? I closed my eyes, trying to push away the dark thoughts, but they clung to me like ghosts. When the bus stopped at the school gate, I nearly jumped off, walking so fast I almost tripped. The scene in front of me made my blood run cold. The entrance to St. Peter's, which usually had just a few kids playing, was now crowded with people. Parents were clustered together, whispering among themselves, all with looks of curiosity and concern. From a nearby classroom, I could hear the high-pitched screams of crying children cutting into my heart like knives. I whispered a prayer. "Dear God, please take care of my boy." A tall police officer in a dark blue uniform came out to meet me. His face was serious, expressionless, and that scared me even more. "Are you Leo's grandmother?" he asked, his voice low but firm. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. He motioned for me to follow him, leading me to a classroom at the end of the hall. Each step felt heavy, like I was walking into a nightmare. Inside the classroom, the scene left me paralyzed. Leo, my little grandson, was huddled in a corner, his hands covering his face, his shoulders shaking. He looked smaller than ever, like a lost little bird. Every so often he'd peek out, his eyes red, towards the open lunchbox on the teacher's desk. The green lunchbox, the same kind Lucy used to pack his lunch, was sitting there like evidence of something awful. On the desk, a clear Ziploc bag had been torn open, revealing little pink pills rolling around inside. They were tiny, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, and they looked just like the sweet candies kids love. But no, I knew right away they weren't candy. A few feet away, another little boy was being treated by a nurse, his face pale, clutching his stomach tightly, his eyes squeezed shut in pain. A woman, probably his mother, was beside him, crying as she stroked his hair and murmured prayers. The officer next to me exclaimed, his voice filled with shock, "What your grandson brought in is really terrible. Look!" We have no idea where the kid got this." His words were like a knife straight to my heart. My legs went weak, and I had to grab the edge of the desk to keep from falling. Leo? My 7-year-old grandson. How could he be connected to something so terrible? I wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong, that my grandson would never do something like that. But my throat closed up and I couldn't say a word. Miss Jimenez, Leo's teacher, was nearby, her hair a mess and her face distraught. She recounted what happened, her voice trembling on the verge of tears. At lunch, Leo told his friends that his mom's lunchbox had candy in it. The kids, being curious, gathered around to look. That boy. She pointed to the little one being treated. He quickly grabbed a pill and popped it in his mouth. And then he just collapsed. I was so scared I called the paramedics and the police right away. Every word she spoke landed on me like a hammer blow. Candy? His mom's lunchbox. I tried to remember the morning, but my mind was a jumble of disconnected fragments. The classroom door swung open and another middle-aged police officer walked in, his face serious, as if carved from stone. He was wearing latex gloves and carefully picked up one of the pink pills, holding it up to the light. The entire room held its breath, as if everyone was waiting for a final verdict. I looked at him, praying he would say it was all a mistake, that they were just candy, but his expression was cold, without a hint of emotion. He shook his head, and in a firm voice that sounded like a sentence being passed, he declared, "This isn't candy. It's a controlled substance." The silence was absolute, as if the entire world had stopped moving. A controlled substance? Those two words echoed in my head, sharp and cruel. I felt the blood turn to ice in my veins. Every cell in my body trembled with fear and confusion. Leo, the boy who still played superhero and gave me scribbled drawings, how could he be involved in something like this? I wanted to scream, to run and hug him, to shield him from all those eyes that were now looking at him like he was a delinquent. But I just stood there, paralyzed, my nails digging into my palms until they hurt. In the midst of that dead silence, Leo's voice broke into sobs, small but heartbreaking. "I just thought they were candy, Grandma." The boy looked up, his big eyes filled with tears, searching for me like someone pleading for help. His words were like a dagger that plunged straight into my heart. Just a few hours earlier, before the sunrise had even painted the horizon pink, I had woken up as old folks do. The old wall clock in the kitchen ticked away the seconds with its steady rhythm, as if reminding me that time waits for no one. I sat up, my legs numb from the morning chill in Houston. My little house, which had witnessed so many family memories, was still wrapped in a soft twilight. I pulled the thin blanket around me, put on the old sweater Lucy always joked looked like it was from another century, and slowly made my way down to the kitchen. The smell of yesterday's coffee still lingered in the air, giving me a faint sense of calm. In the kitchen, Lucy, my daughter-in-law, had been up for a while. She moved with the quick efficiency of a worker bee, her hands rapidly preparing lunch. The sound of the knife on the cutting board was a familiar melody. On the counter sat two neatly packed lunchboxes. One was green with a superhero on it for Leo, and the other was a simple silver one for Lucy herself. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her slice an apple and arrange the pieces like a flower in Leo's lunchbox. She carefully trimmed the crusts off his sandwich and placed a star-shaped slice of cheese on top. Watching her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She was always so meticulous and organized, as if trying to make up for the financial struggles our family was going through. "Up early, Carol?" Lucy looked up and gave me a tired smile. Her eyes had dark circles under them, probably from another late night of work. I know she often works overtime at the office to earn extra money. My son David was no better, always buried in paperwork and endless meetings. I just nodded with a smile. "Yes, I'm old, I don't sleep much." "Making Leo's lunch?" "Yeah, he's so picky. If I don't make it look nice, he won't eat," Lucy said as she sprinkled some shredded carrots on the salad in her own lunchbox. I happened to notice a small, clear baggie with something pink inside her lunchbox. I didn't think much of it. I figured they were just those vitamin pills she sometimes takes. She once told me she suffered from headaches and that the doctor had recommended supplements. I didn't ask any questions, just poured myself a cup of hot tea and sat down to watch her work. In the living room, David was fighting his own battle against time. I could hear the rustling of papers and his muttered complaints. "Mom, have you seen my red pen?" "Oh, I'm going to be late for my meeting." I shook my head, smiling to myself. David was always the same, rushed and clumsy, just like Edward used to be. With a piece of toast in his mouth, he wrestled with his tie while messing up the stack of papers on the table. "David, calm down. You're going to knock everything over," I warned. But he just mumbled distractedly, his eyes glued to his documents. Amidst all that chaos, the only calm one was Leo. He was sitting in his high chair at the table, swinging his legs that didn't quite reach the floor, and playing with a colored pencil. His big eyes were shining as if he were dreaming of some adventure. Leo is the greatest joy of my life, the light in the middle of days when our family struggles with debt and worries. He has the exact same smile David had as a boy, that wide grin that erases any fatigue. But that morning he seemed different, kind of bored. He let out a loud sigh and looked at his lunchbox with distaste. "Grandma, my lunch is always the same." "Just superheroes, I'm sick of it," he said with a pout, tapping the table with his pencil. I laughed and went over to stroke his head. Leo's soft hair slipped through my fingers with that sweet scent of kids' shampoo. "Bored? But your mom worked so hard to make it look nice," I said jokingly, but Leo didn't smile. He tilted his head, glanced over at Lucy's silver lunchbox, and leaned in close to my ear, whispering as if sharing a huge secret. "Grandma, Mom's food is probably way better than mine. That's why she told me to take mine and not to touch hers. But today, I want to try Mom's." The boy's mischief made me chuckle. I remembered when David was little, just as mischievous, always curious to try what was forbidden. I winked at Leo and, in a playful tone, told him, "Well, today you can be an explorer. Let's see how your mom's food tastes." At that moment, I thought it was just an innocent game, a harmless little prank. I had no idea my words would be like a small pebble rolling down a mountainside, capable of starting an avalanche. Just then, Lucy's voice came from upstairs, a bit rushed. "Leo, remember to take your lunchbox. I set it aside for you." She was busy pulling her hair back into a bun, a wooden comb in her hand, in just as much of a hurry as David. I saw Leo flash a mischievous grin, the kind that meant he was about to do something he shouldn't. He shot me a look, as if seeking my complicity, and in a flash, he swapped the lunchboxes on the counter. The green one went to Lucy's spot, and he gripped the silver one tightly. He quickly zipped up his backpack, hiding his treasure, his eyes sparkling as if he had just accomplished a great mission. I shook my head and smiled to myself, thinking it was nothing more than a childish game. "Leo, don't be too naughty or your mom will scold both of us," I said as I handed him a water bottle, adding randomly, "Drink plenty of water, you don't want to get thirsty in the midday heat." Leo nodded, grinning from ear to ear, and ran to the door, where David was already waiting with a jangle of keys, rushing him. "Leo, hurry up, son, I'm late for work." Lucy came running down the stairs, her hair now tied up but with beads of sweat on her forehead. She bent down to tie Leo's shoes, murmuring, "You have to be a good boy today, honey, and eat everything I made for you." In the rush, she didn't notice the small change on the counter. The silver lunchbox was already in Leo's backpack, while the green one ended up in Lucy's tote bag. I stood there, watching the typical scene of a hectic morning, my heart calm with the warmth of family. I never imagined that in that instant, a small mistake had already taken root, ready to explode like a bomb. David hurried Leo one last time, and the two of them left for the car. Lucy waved goodbye to me, her smile tired but full of affection. "Mom, you take care at home. I'll be back early this afternoon." I nodded and stood at the door, watching the car disappear down the alley. Before closing it, I glanced back at the kitchen. Still a bit messy. A few breadcrumbs, a plate with leftover butter, and the basket of vegetables I hadn't gotten around to cleaning. Everything seemed normal, just like any other day, but deep down, I felt a faint premonition, an unease that brushed against my soul, as if I sensed something bad was about to happen. I went back to the vegetable basket, trying to shake off the strange feeling. I told myself I was probably overreacting, that Leo was just playing a little game, that Lucy's lunchbox surely just had sandwiches and salad, nothing important. But deep down, I couldn't stop thinking about that pink Ziploc baggie inside her lunchbox. Why had Lucy warned Leo so carefully not to touch her lunchbox? Why had she left that in there and not somewhere else? The questions swirled in my head, but I pushed them aside, convincing myself I was just getting old and prone to imagining things. I couldn't have imagined that the small disarray of a typical morning would be the start of a storm ready to bring the roof I had spent my whole life building crashing down. Standing in the classroom, the officer's words, "controlled substance," buzzed in my mind like an out-of-control swarm. They pierced every cell, making me feel like the world was spinning. I thought I had endured enough pain in my life, from the lean days raising David to the sudden death of Edward from a heart attack, but I had never felt as helpless as I did in that moment. The classroom, which just hours before was probably filled with children's laughter, now felt as cold as a morgue. The smell of chalk mixed with the disinfectant coming from the corner where the nurse was attending to the sick child, and it squeezed my chest even tighter. Leo, my dear grandson, was sobbing uncontrollably, tears and snot running down his little face. He clung to my sleeve, his small fingers gripping it as if I were the only life raft in the middle of a storm. "Grandma, I didn't know. I didn't do it on purpose." The boy's voice trembled, broken, each sob like a stab to my heart. I dropped to the floor and hugged him tightly, feeling his little body shake over and over. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his hot breath on my neck. I wanted to say something to calm him down, to assure him everything would be okay, but my throat was tight. Not a single word came out. My mind was blank, filled only with a fear and confusion that drowned out all thought. The classroom door burst open, the dry creak of the hinges like a stifled roar. 2 officers entered, one with a camera and the other with a black case. The click of the camera shutter echoed, cold and merciless, as if capturing the broken pieces of my life, the open silver lunchbox, the pink pills scattered inside the torn Ziploc bag, and Leo's terrified face, his red-rimmed eyes looking at me pleading. Each click of the camera was a hammer blow to my chest, engraving that scene so I could never forget it. A health worker in a white coat used tweezers to pick up one of the pills and place it in a glass vial, sealing it with a label. Her movements were slow, precise, professional, and that very precision filled me with terror. They acted as if it were just another day at work, as if what they were handling wasn't the nightmare that was tearing my family apart. I wanted to scream, to ask why us, why Leo, but I was frozen, my arms still wrapped around my grandson, feeling the frantic beat of his heart. In the hallway, the murmuring of the parents grew louder, like a wave crashing through the open window. Some peered curiously inside and then whispered, "My God, what kind of kid brings that to school?" Another sharper voice rose up. "Whose family is that reckless kid from?" Every word was a needle piercing my chest, sharp and venomous. I wanted to run out, to shout at them that it wasn't Leo's fault, that he was just a 7-year-old boy. But I knew it would be useless. "Miss Jimenez," Leo's teacher, stood by the door, trying to calm the commotion. "Please, everyone, go home. Let the school handle the situation," she said, her voice shaking. But the crowd didn't move, their eyes filled with morbid curiosity and judgment. The officer from before, his face as serious as carved stone, approached me. He opened a small notebook and his pen glided across the paper with a dry scratch. "You're the boy's relative?" he asked, his voice deep but cold, as if he were interrogating a criminal. I nodded, my throat dry and my voice catching. I'm his grandmother." He looked at me, showing no emotion, and then wrote something in his notebook. "We will be contacting the parents immediately. This is a very serious matter," he said, his tone as cold as a final judgment. I felt my legs give way, and had to hold on to the edge of the desk to keep from collapsing. Serious. That word echoed in my head, heavy as a boulder. I sank into a chair, as if all my strength had abandoned me. 1,000 questions spun in my mind, but no answers appeared. Why? Why did it have to be Lucy's lunchbox? I tried to remember the morning, and the image of Leo swapping the lunchboxes flashed clearly in my mind. The boy's mischievous smile, the way he whispered to me about being an explorer, all of it now seemed like a cruel joke of fate. I had laughed. I had been complicit in his prank without knowing I was pushing him into a storm. My heart constricted, a heavy guilt wrapped around me, as if I myself had placed those pills in Leo's hands. Not even 30 minutes had passed when the classroom door flew open and David burst in like a hurricane. His white shirt was rumpled with a few buttons undone, his tie crooked, as if he had run straight from the office without a second thought. His face was flushed, beads of sweat dotted his forehead, and his eyes reflected absolute bewilderment. He froze when he saw Leo huddled in my arms, his face still streaked with tears. "Mom, Leo!" David yelled, his voice hoarse, as if he'd been shouting on the way over. He immediately turned to Officer Ramirez, his gaze a mixture of confusion and fury. "What the hell is going on here? Who did something to my son?" Right behind David, Lucy also ran in. Her hastily made bun had come undone, and stray strands of hair fell across her shoulders. Her lips were pale, colorless, and her eyes, which normally sparkled, now looked dull, as if she were walking through a nightmare. Her gaze swept across the room. Miss Jimenez huddled in a corner, the officer with his notebook, and finally, it landed on the silver lunchbox on the desk. When she saw the torn Ziploc bag and the pink pills scattered inside, she froze, her face as white as a sheet of paper. I saw her hand tremble, and she gripped the handle of her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. Lucy took a step back, as if she wanted to run from what was on the table, but her legs seemed to fail her. Officer Ramirez stood up, an imposing figure, and his voice was harsh, devoid of emotion. "Who packed this lunch for the boy?" His question fell like a hammer blow, making the air in the rooms thicken. I could clearly hear the sound of another officer's pen scratching on paper, as if recording every moment of this storm. All eyes turned to Lucy, who remained motionless, her lips pressed tight, and her gaze fixed on the floor, as if trying to escape it all. I hugged Leo tighter, feeling his heart race. I wanted to say something, to protect my daughter-in-law, but the fear and doubt inside me kept me silent. Lucy gave a slight nod, her voice trembling and broken as if it took too much effort to speak. I did, but I don't know anything. I have nothing to do with this." Her words were weak, like a plea, but her terrified eyes seemed to accuse her. David spun around to face his wife, his eyes blazing with a mix of rage and shock. "Lucy, what the hell are you saying?" His voice was raspy, as if the truth coming to light was suffocating him. I had never seen David like this, his face contorted with pain and desperation. He took a step forward, standing in front of Lucy, his fists clenched, as if trying to contain the storm inside him. "You say you don't know? Where did that come from, Lucy? It was in our son's lunchbox." Lucy just lowered her head, her trembling hands clutching the strap of her purse, as if she wanted to tear it apart to get rid of the fear. She didn't answer, just shook her head over and over as tears began to stream down her cheeks. I looked at my daughter-in-law, whom I had considered a daughter for so many years, and felt a sharp pain in my chest. Lucy, the one who always carefully prepared every meal for Leo, the one who smiled despite the hardships, was now standing there trembling like a leaf in the wind. I wanted to believe she was innocent, that it was all a misunderstanding, but her desperate look, the way she avoided David's eyes, wouldn't let me erase the growing suspicion inside me. Officer Ramirez stepped closer, his gaze cold, as if trying to see into Lucy's soul. "You admit you packed the lunchbox. So how do you explain what was inside?" he asked, his voice low but loaded with pressure. Lucy didn't answer, just bowed her head further, letting her tears fall to the floor, drop by drop, like pieces of a family breaking apart. Her silence was a mute confession, and I felt my heart tighten. I wanted to scream, to ask her why, but I just sat there holding Leo, feeling his warmth as my last refuge. David lost control. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her hard, his voice almost a shout. "Lucy, tell me what you did. You know what that is, don't you? Say it." His eyes were red, as if everything he had ever trusted was crumbling before him. I saw Lucy flinch, her shoulders shuddering under David's grip, but she still said nothing, only cried, her choked sobs tearing through the air. Seeing his parents fight, Leo burst into tears. The boy buried himself in my arms, hiding his face against my chest, sobbing. I didn't know. I just wanted to try Mom's food. His small, trembling voice sounded like a plea for forgiveness. I hugged him tightly, feeling my heart break into a million pieces. "Shh, it's okay, my love, it's not your fault," I whispered, though I didn't believe my own words. Whose fault was it then? Leo's, for being mischievous and swapping the lunchboxes? Lucy's, for leaving that in hers? Or mine, for laughing, for encouraging my grandson's prank without foreseeing what would come? Miss Jimenez, standing in the corner of the room, tried to intervene. "Mr. David, Mrs. Lucy, please calm down. For Leo's sake, please." Her voice trembled, but David didn't listen. He let go of Lucy's shoulders, turned away, and buried his face in his hands, as if to stop himself from doing something worse. Lucy collapsed into a chair, her hands covering her face, crying inconsolably. I looked at my two children, one shaking with rage, the other shattered by guilt, and I felt my heart being torn apart. Officer Ramirez signaled for everyone to be quiet. He looked around the room, his gaze resting on the lunchbox on the table, and then turned to us. "All of you, come with me to the station. We need to get this all sorted out," he said in an unyielding voice. A chill ran down my spine. The police station? Just the thought of Leo, my 7-year-old grandson, walking into that place made my heart feel like it was stopping. The drive from the school to the police station felt like a century. Sitting in the back of the patrol car, I held Leo tightly against my chest, feeling every one of his faint sighs. The siren and the roar of the engine sounded outside, but inside, a suffocating silence reigned. I glanced at David, my son, sitting in the front seat, running his fingers through his hair over and over, as if trying to pull out the anger and confusion. Lucy, my daughter-in-law, was beside me, but she seemed like a shadow, her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands clasped so tightly they turned white. I wanted to say something to break that deadly silence, but my throat closed up and no words came out. Leo fell asleep in my arms, exhausted from the crying and the fear he had experienced at school. His eyes were still swollen, his long lashes still damp, trembling every time the car hit a bump. I stroked his cheek, my soul in pieces. He's only 7, the age of superheroes and innocent pranks. And now he was trapped in a nightmare that not even I, a 68-year-old woman, could comprehend. I wondered how everything had come to this. Just a few hours before, I was laughing with him, encouraging him to be an explorer with his mom's lunchbox. Now those silly words were a knife twisting inside me, and I couldn't stop blaming myself. When the car stopped in front of the police station, another chill ran through my body. The gray building with its cold concrete walls seemed to swallow what little hope I had left. The officer opened the door and told us to get out. David went first, his shoulders slumped, carrying an invisible weight. Lucy followed slowly, her legs trembling on the verge of buckling. I was carrying Leo, even though he was getting heavier than an old woman like me could handle. "Grandma," he murmured in his sleep, his voice weak, tearing my heart out. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'm right here, my love. Don't be scared." We were led into a small, cold interrogation room, lit by the harsh white light of a fluorescent tube that made everything feel starker. On the worn wooden table, they had placed the silver lunchbox and a sealed Ziploc bag, like evidence of a crime I still couldn't accept. I sat Leo on the chair next to me, not letting go of his hand, as if he might disappear if I did. David sat across from us, his gaze empty, while Lucy huddled in a corner, her hands still clasped, clinging to the last shred of composure. Officer Ramirez, a man with a face as serious as carved stone, sat across from us. He opened his notebook, his voice deep and firm like a hammer blow. "We need to hear the truth directly from you." His words echoed in the room, cold and sharp, as if trying to cut through any layer of concealment. I felt my heart beat faster, a vague fear rising within me. The truth? What truth? I didn't know, and it was precisely that not knowing that made me feel more powerless than ever. David was about to open his mouth, perhaps to ask a question or make an excuse, when Lucy suddenly broke into inconsolable sobs. Her cries shattered the silence, echoing in the small room like a wordless confession. I told Leo to never switch the lunchboxes," Lucy said between gasps, as if each word had to be torn from the depths of her chest. "I didn't want my son to get mixed up in this." She lowered her head, her tears hitting the table one by one, like fragments of a secret she had tried to hide. I flinched, my heart skipping a beat. Lucy's words were like a lightning flash that illuminated part of the nightmare, but at the same time, they dragged me into a deeper darkness. What was this? Why had she told Leo not to switch the lunchboxes? I looked at Lucy, searching for some clarity in her red-rimmed eyes, but I only found panic and guilt. I wanted to ask, to scream, but I remained still, clutching Leo's hand, as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Leo, now awake, looked up at his mother, his big eyes still filled with tears. I was just curious," the boy murmured, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "I switched the lunchboxes when Mom went upstairs. Grandma saw me too." His words were like a knife straight to my heart. I felt the blood freeze in my veins, a heavy guilt settling over me. Yes, I had seen him. I had seen him switch the lunchboxes. I had joked with him, thinking it was a harmless game. And now, those innocent words felt like an accusation, leaving me breathless. Unintentionally, I had pushed my grandson into this situation, and that thought weighed on me like a boulder on my chest. David buried his face in his hands, slumping over the table, his shoulders shaking. "Leo, why did you do that?" His voice was raspy, as if choked by the truth. I saw David's eyes were red, not with anger, but with a deep pain. He looked at Lucy, with a mixture of fury and desperation. "Lucy, what do you know about all this?" "Say it!" But Lucy just cried, her choked sobs shaking her body. "I never imagined the boy would do that," she said weakly, as if begging for forgiveness. "I didn't check my lunchbox before I left the house either." I looked at her, my heart in a knot. I wanted to believe her, to believe she truly knew nothing, that this was just a terrible mistake. But the way she hung her head, the way she avoided David's eyes, wouldn't let me push away the doubt growing inside me. Why didn't she check her lunchbox? Why did she warn Leo not to switch it? As if she knew there was something dangerous inside. The questions drilled into my mind, but I didn't dare ask them, because I was afraid the answer would destroy what little was left of this family. Officer Ramirez kept writing, his face as cold as ice, showing no emotion. Another officer, a young woman, came over and placed a box of tissues in front of Lucy. "Calm down. We need you to speak clearly," she said, in a soft but firm voice. Lucy pushed the box away with her hand as the tears continued to fall. "I don't know. I swear I don't know why that was in there," she repeated, but her voice trailed off, as if even she didn't believe what she was saying. I squeezed Leo's hand tightly, feeling an unbearable mix of guilt and confusion. After a long silence, Ramirez slammed his palm on the table, the sharp sound breaking the suffocating tension. "If you don't tell the truth, your guilt will only be greater," he said harshly, his cold eyes like knives piercing Lucy. "Why were there controlled substances in your lunchbox?" The question landed like a hammer blow, leaving the room in suspense. I looked at Lucy, my daughter-in-law, whom I had considered a daughter, whom I had admired so much for her care and dedication. Now she was there, her eyes red and empty, as if her soul had been lost. At first, Lucy just shook her head, her lips pressed tight, as if trying to keep the secret she carried inside at all costs. But Ramirez's gaze didn't let her go. It was like an invisible blade cutting through every layer of her silence. David looked up, his eyes filled with desperation and anger, as if begging her to say something that could save the situation. I saw Lucy's hand tremble, her fingers clenching so tightly that her nails dug into her skin, leaving red marks. Finally, as if she couldn't hold it in any longer, she let out a name, her voice broken, as if spitting out a poisoned thorn. It was Alex, a guy from work. He talked me into it. The entire room froze. David was stunned. He shot his head up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Alex, who's that? Why are you mixed up with him?" he asked, his voice trembling, caught between shock and fury. I saw his shoulders tense, as if he were fighting to contain a hurricane inside him. I was also perplexed. That name, Alex, sounded like a strange bell. I searched my memory, but I couldn't recall Lucy ever mentioning him. All that came to mind was the image of her coming home late, with tired eyes and a forced smile. I had thought she was working overtime to earn more money to help the family. But it was all a lie. Lucy hung her head, her tears hitting the table one after another, like pieces of a truth she could no longer hide. He said it was just for this one time. She sobbed, her voice broken as if each word was a struggle to get out. Just once. That would be enough to pay off all our debts, to cover my parents' medical bills back home. He promised me it would be safe, that no one would find out. Lucy's words were like a knife twisting inside me. I remembered the times Mrs. Rosa, my neighbor, would mutter that Lucy was coming home late, that she seemed more stressed than usual. I had ignored those comments, thinking they were just neighborhood gossip. Now I wished I had paid attention, had asked more questions, had seen the signs I had missed. Ramirez nodded, his pen moving quickly across the paper, noting every word Lucy said. "Go on," he said, his voice deep and firm. "How did you communicate with Alex? Where were you supposed to deliver the merchandise? How much did he promise to pay you?" Each question was another blow, crushing what little hope I had left. Lucy took a deep breath, trying to wipe away her tears, but they kept coming. "He gave me that Ziploc bag. He told me to take it to a place on the outskirts. I didn't know what was inside, I swear. He just told me it was special merchandise, and that if I did it right, he'd give me $10,000. She answered, her voice trembling, as if trying to convince herself that she really didn't know anything. $10,000. That number was another stab straight to my heart. For just $10,000, Lucy had gambled away our entire family. I looked at her, wanting to scream, wanting to ask her why she had taken such a risk. But I just sat there, holding Leo tightly, feeling the boy's racing heartbeat. I thought about the family's hard times, about Lucy's parents' hospital bills, about the debts she and David had to carry. I knew they were struggling, but I never imagined that desperation would push Lucy down this path. David shot up from his chair, which clattered to the floor. "You sold out this entire family for money, Lucy." He yelled, his voice broken, as if everything he had ever believed in was turning to smoke. His face was red, the veins on his forehead bulging, but his eyes held not just rage, but also a deep pain. "Did you think about Leo? Did you think about Mom, about me, about this family?" he shouted, his voice trembling as if he were about to cry. I pulled Leo closer to my chest, afraid the boy would be scarred by this scene. He looked up, his big eyes filled with tears, and whispered, "Grandma, is Daddy mad at Mommy?" I didn't know what to say, so I just held him tighter and whispered back, "Daddy's just sad, honey. Everything's going to be okay." But I didn't even believe my own words. How could it be okay when Lucy, Leo's dedicated mother, was mixed up in something so horrible? A female officer nearby came over and gently placed a hand on David's shoulder. "Calm down, sir. We need everyone to cooperate," she said in a soft but firm voice. David took a deep breath, turned around, and grabbed his head with both hands, as if trying to stop himself from doing something worse. Lucy sat there crying non-stop, her shoulders shaking. I didn't want to. I just wanted to help the family, she muttered as if talking to herself. Just then, another officer came in with a thick file in his hand. He handed it to Ramirez and whispered something in his ear. Ramirez quickly flipped through a few pages, nodded and looked up, his voice grave. "Alex Torres." That name isn't new. He's been on our watch list for some time." His words were like a lightning strike. I flinched, a new fear rising inside me. Alex Torres wasn't just a co-worker of Lucy's, but a criminal being watched by the police. My daughter-in-law hadn't just made a mistake. She was involved in a dangerous network. I felt my heart stop. The air in the room grew thick. The only sounds were the scratching of Ramirez's pen on paper and Lucy's ceaseless crying. After the first round of questioning, we were taken to a small waiting room. The white fluorescent light cast down on us, distorting the shadows on the wall like the broken pieces of our lives. I sat on a hard plastic chair with Leo in my arms. The boy had fallen asleep from exhaustion, his eyes still swollen, his long, damp lashes stuck together. I took off my old wool sweater and draped it over him, making sure to cover his shoulders well. His quiet breathing was the only thing that comforted me in that moment. But even that wasn't enough to soothe the pain tearing me apart inside. I thought I was used to life's hardships, but now I felt smaller and more helpless than ever. David sat across from Lucy, separated only by a small wooden table, but the distance between them seemed like a chasm. His hands were clenched into tight fists, the veins on the back standing out as if he were holding back a storm. His red-rimmed eyes no longer held the tenderness of a father, of a husband, but a mixture of rage and pain. He looked at Lucy, his voice trembling with restraint. "What have you done to this family, Lucy? Do you know how this is affecting Leo? A 7-year-old boy brought to a police station, looked at like he's a criminal. Did you think about what that would do to his mind?" David's words were like knives, sharp and cruel, making my heart ache. Lucy was there, her head bowed, her silent tears falling onto the cold tiled floor, drop by drop, like confessions that couldn't be put into words. She didn't look up, didn't answer, just remained motionless, her shoulders racked with tremors. I looked at my daughter-in-law, whom I once treated like a daughter, whom I was so proud of for her dedication and sacrifice, and I felt a deep pain. Lucy, with the dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights, with the forced smile every time she came home, now looked like a shadow of her former self. I wanted to hug her, to tell her I understood the pressure she was under, but I couldn't. The mistrust and pain were too great, like a wall separating me from her. David couldn't hold it in any longer. He shot up, his voice exploding in a shout that echoed through the small room. "You were willing to drag this family into the abyss for money, Lucy? Do you know this is going to destroy us?" The water bottle in his hand flew to the floor, rolling under the table with a dull thud. I flinched, quickly motioning for David to lower his voice, afraid his shouting would wake Leo. I pulled him closer to my chest, murmuring nonsensical words. "Sleep tight, my love. Grandma's here." But my voice was trembling, as if I too were pleading for a little peace in the midst of the storm. Lucy looked up, her eyes swollen and red, and she looked at David with desperation. "I never wanted to hurt our son," she said, her voice weak, as if she had to tear each word from her chest. "I just wanted us to get out of this misery. I thought, just this once, just one time, we could pay off the debts, help my parents, give Leo a better life." Her words broke, mixed with choked sobs. I saw her shoulders shake, as if she were fighting against a complete collapse. David laughed, but it was a bitter laugh without a hint of joy. "Once," he repeated sarcastically. "You've clearly done this more than once, Lucy. Stop lying!" He pointed a finger at her, his eyes blazing with fury. "Do you think I'm so stupid I didn't notice? You come home late from work, always nervous, always hiding things. You think I didn't see it?" His words fell like hail on Lucy, who shrank back like a cornered animal. I couldn't take it anymore. "David, that's enough." I raised my voice hoarsely, trying to keep it low so as not to scare Leo. "What's the point of yelling like this? You're tearing both of you apart." I took his arm and forced him to sit down. He looked at me, his eyes still red, but his shoulders slumped as if the anger had left him empty. I turned to Lucy, wanting to say something, but a lump formed in my throat. I wanted to ask her why, to scold her for dragging the whole family into this nightmare, but seeing the desperation in her eyes, all I felt was compassion. Lucy, my daughter-in-law, who was once the light of this house, now seemed like a candle about to be extinguished. A police officer walked by, poked his head in the door, and said sternly, "You need to keep it down. This is a police station." David took a deep breath, sat down, and buried his face in his hands, as if to shield himself from reality. Lucy wiped her tears, but they kept falling, soaking her blouse. I looked at my 2 children, one destroyed by rage, the other by guilt, and I felt my heart break. My family, the most precious thing I had cared for my whole life, now seemed like a house of cards, ready to collapse with the slightest breeze. In the midst of that silence, Leo stirred in my arms. He mumbled in his sleep, his voice very small and weak. "Grandma, did I do something bad?" His question was like a knife straight to my heart. I hugged him tightly as my own tears fell onto his soft hair. "No, my love, you didn't do anything wrong," I whispered, though my throat burned and I couldn't say anything more. The afternoon at the police station was tinted with a yellowish light that barely filtered through a small window, failing to chase away the chill of the interrogation room. I continued to hold Leo, feeling his steady breathing as he slept restlessly. The constant hum of the air conditioner sounded like a mechanical heart, but it couldn't drown out the tension suffocating my family. Time seemed to stand still, each second falling as heavily as a stone on my chest. Leo stirred again, his small hands clutching my clothes, as if even in his dreams he was afraid of being abandoned. Officer Ramirez dropped a stack of files on the table, and the thud of paper against wood sounded like a sentence. He flipped through a few pages, revealing grainy, covertly taken photos of a man I assumed was Alex. His hard face, his narrow, cunning eyes, his crooked smile that seemed to defy the whole world. Ramirez looked directly at Lucy, his voice deep and sharp as a blade. "You have 2 choices, cooperate with us and get leniency, or take all the blame for him." His words fell like a hammer blow in the already charged air. I saw Lucy tremble, her lips pressed tight, her red eyes fixed on the table, as if fighting an internal battle. David was beside her, still as a statue, but his eyes held an ocean of despair. His shoulders were slumped, his hands pressed against his thighs, trying to gather his last bit of strength. I knew he was devastated, not just by Lucy's betrayal, but by feeling powerless to protect his family. I wanted to reach out, to take his hand, but I remained still, holding Leo, as if the child were the only anchor keeping me from falling apart. Lucy was still silent, her head bowed, her tears falling on the table, one after another like fragments of a confession that couldn't find a voice. I looked at her, my soul torn. Part of me wanted to be angry, to blame her for dragging us into this nightmare, but another part only felt compassion. Lucy, my daughter-in-law, the one who always carefully prepared Leo's meals, the one who tried to smile even when life was hard, was now just a shadow, broken and hopeless. I thought about those nights she came home late with dark circles under her eyes, or the times she sat in the kitchen in silence, staring at the bills with an empty gaze. Was it that desperation that pushed her into Alex's arms, down a path she never wanted to be a part of? Ramirez tapped his fingers on the table, his voice hardening. "Mrs. Lucy, time is running out. If you don't talk, we'll have to consider you a primary accomplice." His words were like an icy wind that swept through the room, making me shiver. I saw Lucy take a deep breath, her shoulders shaking, as if trying to summon all her courage to face the truth. Finally, she lifted her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her voice was firm, as if she had made a final decision. "I'll talk. I'll tell you everything I know. I just ask you to leave my family out of it." The atmosphere in the room tensed, as if the entire world was holding its breath for Lucy's confession. Ramirez signaled to another officer to turn on the recorder, and a faint click sounded as the device started. Lucy began to speak, her voice trembling but clear, as if she was seeking redemption with every word. "Alex contacted me by phone. He gave me another man's number, told me to take a Ziploc bag to a warehouse on the outskirts of Houston next Friday. He said I just had to leave the bag in a box of merchandise. that someone would come by to pick it up. He promised to pay me $10,000 and then I wouldn't have to do anything else. Every word she spoke was soaked in tears, as if she were pulling thorns from her own chest. I listened with a heavy heart. $10,000! For that amount, Lucy had put our entire family at risk. I wanted to scream, to ask her why she had been so naive, but I stayed still, holding Leo tightly, feeling his warmth as the last thing holding me up. David covered his face with his hands, his broad shoulders slumping, as if all his strength had left him. He wasn't yelling anymore. All that was left was the exhaustion of a man who had lost everything. "Lucy," he whispered, his voice broken, as if just saying her name was too painful. Ramirez took careful notes, his expression still cold, though I sensed a hint of satisfaction in the way he nodded. "Continue," he said, his voice grave. "The contact's name? The exact location?" Lucy inhaled again, wiped her tears and went on. "His name is Raul. I don't know his last name. The warehouse is near the old county highway, next to an old gas station. I only saw Alex there once. He gave me the Ziploc bag and told me to put it inside a lunchbox that no one would suspect." She paused, and tears welled up again, though this time she didn't try to wipe them away. "I know I was wrong. I just thought it was the only way to get us out of debt." I felt my heart breaking. Lucy, my daughter-in-law, had been cornered into working for a man like Alex. I remembered the times she told me about her parents back home, about the mounting hospital bills, about the sleepless nights working extra shifts. I had seen her tired, but I never imagined she would go this far. I wanted to be angry, but at the same time, I felt compassion for her, for a mother, for a wife driven by desperation down the wrong path. When the interrogation was over, Ramirez stood up and instructed 2 officers to get ready to take Lucy away. I saw her tremble, as if she understood this was her last moment with her family. Before she went through the iron door, Lucy turned and walked towards me. Her hand, cold and trembling, gripped mine, trying to convey a wordless apology. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking, "please tell Leo that I love him so much and that I'm truly sorry." Her red, tear-filled eyes shone with a pain and love that were impossible to hide. Leo woke up with a start, as if sensing his mother was about to leave. The boy burst into tears, ran, and clung to his mother's legs, sobbing, "Mommy, don't go!" "I'm sorry, I won't switch the lunchbox anymore." I felt like my heart was being ripped out. Lucy knelt down, hugged Leo, and her tears fell onto the boy's hair. "My dear son, Mommy loves you so much," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one who made a mistake." A female officer approached, gently trying to pry Leo's hands loose, but the boy held on tightly, crying until he was hoarse. I took him in my arms, feeling his whole body tremble. "Mommy!" he screamed in desperation, but the iron door had already clanged shut, cold and cruel, cutting us off from the sight of Lucy. I hugged my grandson tightly, and my tears rolled silently down my cheeks. I looked at David. He stood motionless, his gaze empty, as if his soul had been swallowed by that door. The room was filled only with Leo's cries and the dead silence of a family torn to pieces. A few days after that fateful interrogation, I returned to my little house, which had once been a home filled with laughter, but now held a silence that hung heavy like a ghost. I still got up early every morning, sweeping the porch as usual, trying to find some peace in simple chores. But every time I held the broom, I remembered that morning when a mischievous Leo swapped the lunchboxes, when I laughed, not knowing I was opening the door to a nightmare. Today, the Houston sun was still scorching, but it could no longer warm my heart, the heart of a 68-year-old woman trying to mend the broken pieces of her family. As I was sweeping, I was startled to see Mrs. Rosa, my kind but chatty neighbor, rushing towards me with a crumpled local newspaper in her hand. "Carol, have you read this?" she said breathlessly, her eyes shining as if she had uncovered a massive secret. I stopped sweeping, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and took the paper. The huge headline on the front page hit me like a blow, printed in bold letters, as if it were shouting, "Drug kingpin Alex Torres busted. Major Houston network dismantled. Below it was a photo of Alex, the man Lucy had talked about in the interrogation. He was in handcuffs, with 2 police officers on either side, but his face still wore a mocking smirk, as if he wasn't afraid of anything. A chill ran through me, a revulsion that spread through my whole body, as if just looking at him made me feel dirty. I quickly flipped the page, skimming the lines. The article said that Alex Torres was the leader of a drug trafficking ring that had been operating in Houston for years. He had deceived many people, from office employees to blue-collar workers, promising them easy money to drag them into his criminal world. I thought of Lucy, my daughter-in-law, who fell into his trap just because of mounting a hospital bills and the debts weighing on her shoulders. I gripped the newspaper tightly, my hands trembling, not knowing if I should hate Alex, feel sorry for Lucy, or blame myself for not noticing the signs that something was wrong sooner. That evening, David came home from work more exhausted than ever. He dropped his briefcase on the table, the thud echoing in the silent house. "Mom, the whole office is talking," David said, his voice low and dull, as if he had to pull each word from the depths of his chest. "Everyone knows about Lucy. They look at me like I'm a criminal's husband." I saw David's eyes were red, but he held back his tears. I went over to him, placed a hand on my son's shoulder, wanting to say something to comfort him, but a lump formed in my throat. "David, don't pay any attention to them. They don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. But I knew my words weren't enough to ease his pain, the pain of a husband, of a father, bearing the weight of everyone's judgment. Just then, Leo ran out of his room, his big, innocent eyes looking at his dad. "Daddy, is Mommy coming home for dinner tonight?" the boy asked, his voice clear but full of hope. Leo's question was like a knife straight to my heart. David froze, his gaze lost, as if his son's question had dragged him into an abyss. He turned away quickly, bringing a hand to his face, but I saw his shoulders shaking as a single silent tear fell to the floor. "Leo, come here with Grandma," I said quickly, pulling the boy into my arms and handing him the bowl of hot soup from the table. "Eat your soup, honey. I made your favorite tonight." I tried to change the subject, but inside, it felt like salt was being poured on an open wound. Leo looked at me, then at his father, as if he sensed something was wrong, but he didn't ask any more questions, just picked up his spoon and ate his soup in silence. That night, as the family sat in front of the old TV, the news replayed the images of Alex being arrested over and over. The image of the guy in a prison jumpsuit being escorted down a hallway repeated on the screen, as if trying to burn itself into everyone's memory. The news anchor said that Alex would face a very long sentence, up to 20 years in prison for leading a drug trafficking ring. They also mentioned an office employee who cooperated with the police to dismantle his network. I knew it was Lucy, but her name wasn't mentioned as a final protection from the police. I stared at the screen, my heart in turmoil. Part of me felt relief that the culprit had been caught, but another part ached because the price my family was paying was far too high. Suddenly I thought back to that interrogation when Lucy made her final decision. If she hadn't told the truth, if she hadn't cooperated with the police, maybe Alex would still be free, luring others down the path of crime. Maybe my family would have fallen even deeper into the abyss, with Lucy seen as a primary accomplice and Leo growing up under the judgment of society. As bitter as it was, I knew that in that decisive moment, Lucy chose her family. She agreed to face the consequences to protect Leo, to protect David, and to protect me too. That thought hurt, as if my heart were being torn in two. In the days that followed, my little house felt like it was shrouded in an invisible fog. The whole neighborhood was buzzing, gossip spreading like wildfire, seeping into every alley, through every door. Every time I went to the market, dragging my heavy feet along the familiar stone path, I felt the prying eyes of the neighbors. Some would turn their heads, pretending to be busy, but I knew they were whispering behind my back. "That's Carol's family. They say the daughter-in-law is mixed up in drugs." A small voice reached my ears as I was picking out vegetables at a stand. I lowered my head, gripped my market basket tightly, trying to ignore it. But every word was like a needle pricking my pride. But amidst those dark clouds, there were still warm rays of sunshine filtering through, like little lights illuminating my gloomy path. One afternoon, as I was bent over, picking vegetables in the yard, Mrs. Rosa, my chatty but kind-hearted neighbor, knocked on the door. In her hands, she held a basket of still steaming tamales, the aroma of corn filling the air, suddenly reminding me of the days when the whole family would gather around the table. "Carol, I know you and the boy are not to blame," Mrs. Rosa said, her voice sincere and her eyes full of compassion. "Take these for Leo. Children need love, especially now." I took the basket with trembling hands, my throat tight. "Thank you, Rosa," I managed to say, my voice cracking on the verge of tears. Her simple words were like a warm hug around my shattered heart. Another day, as I was sitting on the porch silently watching the sunset, Mr. Javier, an old friend of my late husband, came by. He walked slowly, leaning on his cane, which tapped against the stones. He sat in the wooden chair next to me without saying anything at first, just looking out at the narrow alley. After a while, he spoke in a low voice. "Carol, don't be so hard on yourself. The mistake was one person's, not the whole family's. You did everything you could for David, for Leo." I looked at him, my eyes blurry with tears. "But Javier, I'm a mother, a grandmother. I should have noticed something was wrong. I should have stopped this from happening," I said, my voice trembling. Mr. Javier shook his head and placed his hand on my shoulder. "No one can foresee everything, Carol. You gave that boy a home, a hug. That's what matters most." His words were like a gentle breeze, easing some of the pain inside me. Leo, my dear grandson, slowly went back to school. He was a bit shy, no longer the boy who used to endlessly tell stories about superheroes. I worried that his classmates would reject him, that they would repeat the cruel words of the adults. But thankfully, the children were more innocent than I feared. One afternoon, when I went to pick him up, I saw him playing with a friend, both of them laughing as they kicked a ball around the schoolyard. I stood there watching him, a small sense of relief washing over my soul. But I knew that deep in his fragile heart, Leo still carried a wound that time had not yet healed. Many nights, when the house was quiet, I would find Leo sitting alone at his desk, drawing in his notebook. His drawings were filled with images of his mother, Lucy with her long hair, her gentle smile, sometimes the whole family holding hands under the sun. But his big eyes would always get watery as he drew, as if he were trying hard to hold on to his mother's image in his memory. "Grandma, does Mom remember me?" he asked me once, his voice soft, as if he were afraid the answer would hurt him. I hugged him tightly and whispered, "Your mom thinks about you every single day. Leo, she loves you more than anything in the world." I didn't know if my words were enough to ease his pain, but I hoped he could at least feel that love, even just a little. In the evenings, we would often take walks down the alley in front of the house. The yellowish streetlights illuminated our steps. Some people would look at us with pity, as if offering condolences, but others would simply give us a small nod, their eyes full of empathy. Once, the owner of the corner store gave Leo a piece of candy, smiling. "You're a good boy. Here's a treat." Leo took it, mumbled a shy thank you, and squeezed my hand tighter. I knew he was trying to be strong, trying to move on, even though so many unanswered questions still lived in his small heart. One night, when Leo had fallen fast asleep in my arms on the porch, I looked up at the sky. The stars were shining, small but steady in the infinite darkness. The image of Lucy being led away, looking back at her son with tear-filled eyes, came back to me. I remember that look, painful and full of love, as if she wanted to say that even though she had made mistakes, she still chose to sacrifice herself to protect Leo, to protect our family. My tears fell silently, dampening Leo's soft hair. I whispered to the sleeping child, "Mistakes can destroy a family, but love and sacrifice never disappear. Someday you'll understand that even though your mom made a mistake, she still chose to sacrifice herself to protect you." I thought about David, my son, who now carries the weight of the whole family. He still goes to work every day, still tries to smile at Leo, but I know he's struggling with his own pain. I thought about Lucy, perhaps in a cold cell, facing endless days. And I thought about myself, an old woman, trying to hold the pieces of this family together. As much as it hurts, I know I can't give up. For Leo, for David, and for Lucy, I will keep going, even if the road ahead is full of shadows. Outside, the streetlight continued to cast a dim, yellowish glow on the alley. It wasn't much light, not enough to dispel the darkness, but it was enough to guide my grandson and me. I hugged Leo tighter and quietly sang a lullaby, just like I used to for David when he was a boy. My voice trembled, but I kept singing, like a promise that no matter how strong the storm, I would find a way for my family to get through it. In the darkest of nights, there are always glimmers of light, and I believe that as long as we don't give up, that light will lead us to a better tomorrow. Looking back on everything that happened, I just want to tell you one thing. Sometimes, a small mistake, a moment of weakness, or a hasty decision can drag a whole life into the abyss. The lesson I learned is that there are no shortcuts to escape hardship, and no secrets that can stay hidden forever. The truth always comes out, and the price you pay is higher than you can ever imagine. I hope everyone stays vigilant, that you share with and support each other in difficult times, instead of carrying burdens alone and choosing the wrong path. A family can only stand if it's built on trust, honesty, and love. The story you've just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We're not telling it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence in their own homes? I really wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to get your voice back? I want to hear your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. God always blesses, and I'm convinced that courage will lead us to better days. For now, I'll leave 2 of the channel's most loved stories on the end screen. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.